Hello, everyone. This week's podcast, I've decided to release what was actually our first podcast ever done. My first is, well, at least my first. Um, it's about January 6th, which seems pretty relevant to what's going on in the news. We essentially detailed the events of that day, what was going through our heads, and whatnot. Um, there are a few reasons why I didn't release it right away. I feel like your first attempt at something is usually not your best. Sometimes you get lucky, but I just kind of kept it in the back pocket, just in case something like this maybe came up. So it's nice to have. You'll get to hear us what we were like for the first time. So the show's was even back when we started is now a bit different than it was. So should be fun. Yeah. So basically, we just described the formation of the rabbit hole, and we are now fully diving in with the hearings beginning now. This past Thursday, I believe it was. Just in that one meeting alone, found out a few different things that we discuss in the podcast, but don't really, notice, I guess, so to speak. That would make sense. For example, we note that the Proud Boys marched on the Capitol well before President Trump's speech was over, but didn't put that together somehow that it was pre-planned. I mean, it wasn't far-fetched. It seemed like it was, but it didn't necessarily entail that the head of the, what do you say, the Trump administration, Trump himself, was working directly with the Proud Boys um, in terms of talks. So that's interesting. Trump also saying that he wanted to hang Mike Pence, and that his supporters were saying hang Mike Pence. Trump was informed about this and said that maybe they have the right idea. You know, I think they should. So it's pretty crazy stuff. His own daughter Ivanka came out against him, saying that she didn't believe the elections was stolen. That whole big lie thing, that was true. She took Attorney General Barr's word for it. Attorney General Barr, who he had some pretty damning quotes himself when he gave his deposition. Numerous people telling Trump that the election fraud narrative was bullshit, and he knew it. Obviously, he knew it. Yeah, that was just one meeting. There's still more involved in that. It's check it out if you haven't checked it out already. It lays out a pretty solid foundation for what we are going to see in the next few weeks. Without further ado, I will let you guys listen to the very first podcast of History with Hersaphat.
All right, I
Yeah,
think that should be
have
it.
fun.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to History with Hersaphat. I'm your host, Hersaphat, or Chris, as is my given forename. Today, I'll be talking with a couple friends, Steve
Well,
and Nick,
whoa.
about the Capitol attack of
Hello.
January 6th, 2021. This is the first in a series of moral, ethical, and philosophical conversations about historical events. The views shared on this podcast come from ordinary people who've lived through these events. My hope is that it'll give a unique perspective on history. How is everyone this morning?
Doing well?
Doing well?
Just
Yeah.
had some lunch.
Lunch. What'd you have for
Feeling
lunch?
good. Should be pleasant. I had some homemade chicken and noodles with healing powers because my throat started to feel a little scratchy yesterday.
Oh no.
So I don't know what
Uh-oh.
that could mean.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, like I said, I just had coffee. That's pretty much it, just to get me going here.
Yeah.
Um,
I just been drinking some water. I haven't really had breakfast or anything to eat yet,
yeah.
or any lunch for that matter.
Oh. Uh, yeah. Normally, I know with everything going on in the world right now that it would make more sense to talk about Russia invading Ukraine. Seems the more, relevant discussion, so to speak. But um, decided to go ahead with what I'd already been planning anyway. Um, it's not, being the first podcast, I wasn't expecting, World War III to potentially break out that week.
Right.
So, uh, better late than never. So we'll see. And for future podcasts, we'll definitely be talking about Russia invading Ukraine. And also, we're doing a number of different ideas. We're also going to think about reflections, decade reflections, the 2000s, the 90s, 80s, going year by year. What happened in 2000 is probably will be the first one that we start on that one. However, that second episode is going to be a bit of a doozy. So we'll have to work on that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a
Yeah,
heck of a
there's a lot of current event podcasts already out there. I mean, I like the idea that we're a year behind.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
maybe our shtick, right? Is that we allow ourselves time to process what happened.
right.
People are talking
Right.
about Russia and Ukraine right now. We have no. It's so early. It's so
Right.
early.
Right. That's why I went ahead with it still. Yeah. Because I was just like, there's not enough information. It would just be speculative more than anything.
Mhm.
We don't really know what's going to come of this, how long it's so it may not even be next week. I might hold off until I feel comfortable enough, like, well, okay, we've got enough solid information here that we can, talk about what's transpired, and what's going to happen since then. I do know that I've seen a lot of videos. There's one in particular that really is really rough. It was a dad saying goodbye to his wife and daughter, his little daughter. They're getting on a train to leave the capital in Ukraine, and he's staying behind to fight. And it's just,
Right.
it's a brutal, it's rough to see, and it just,
Yeah.
breaks your heart. So,
Well, I know what video you're
lot
talking
of that.
about, and again, because of how early it is, there's some people who say that that's a Ukrainian soldier letting his kid get on a train and go to safety while he stays and fights. There's some saying that that's a Russian soldier going off to fight. So
Right.
we are very much in the cloud of dust that is war,
right.
Right.
and misinformation is abundant.
Mhm.
That's why, take the safer route and try and just wait it out there. But yeah, those will be the future podcasts we'll be doing. Just some ideas for you. As we start today, I'm going to set the stage, so to speak, of January 6th, the morning of January 6th. Do you guys remember what you were doing that day? Do you remember any? Yeah. Do you remember in DC, it was cloudy and 38 degrees.
Right.
Just a little bit, a little bit chilly that day, but not for some people. People didn't wear shirts, but yeah. If you remember what
Why
you're
don't you
doing,
go first?
if you weren't remember what you're doing, Nick, still take the lead.
I remember I actually called off work that day, but it wasn't because of that. It was because my back was hurting. Like I think I pulled my back at work the
Yeah.
day before.
Yeah.
And I remember getting a message on the Facebook Messenger from Steve rather.
A lot of edits.
A
lot of edits.
lot of
coming
edits. A lot of edits. Yeah. Yeah, I remember getting the Facebook message from Steele that the Capitol was under attack, and so like I was just sitting on the couch, with like the heating pad on, I was like, what, the Capitol, So
Yeah.
like I'm going on YouTube and I'm like looking for something that's live, and what I found was David Pakman, and that's actually the first time that I watched David Pakman was that day.
That's a hell of a way to start.
Yeah. And man, it was crazy. It was just chaos, and I've never seen anything like it at that time. It was very very frightening. And then I also remember watching C-SPAN, watching them go back to the votes, or the counts rather, on C-SPAN later that night with you guys as well.
Yeah, I stayed up till, which isn't necessarily a big deal when it comes to me, but like 3 a.m. just watching C-SPAN, like watching them count each individual vote, certifying the electors. Just come on now. Okay, we got one more here. Let's do it. All right, it's official. Gavel down.
Right.
We're good to go. I waited until that happened before I decided to go to sleep, because you didn't know.
Right. Yep.
Didn't know what the hell.
It's certainly a frightening time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve,
You might get into this. You might get into this later. I'm not sure, but like to me, I was a poll worker on election day in November, And I feel like we knew the results pretty much by the next day, if I recall. I'm trying to remember. Like, it looked like Biden was going to win. Maybe there was a couple states that if they all went for Trump, then he would win. But he needed to win like 4 or 5 of the states that were still counting, and that just didn't seem possible. So we knew by like the next day that Biden had probably won, like 99% chance that he'd won.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like from then until January 6th, there were these like random arbitrary deadlines that I think are all part of the process. You know, I understand that they've been around forever, but it was like, oh no, this day is going to be the day where the election's overturned, or this day is going to be the day where they don't, you know, certify these votes, or we're going to find votes here. Or, you know, there was a lot of talk for like 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And then it kind of, I got numb to it. And I think January 6th was just supposed to be a formality, right? You can't change the votes at Capitol Hill on that day. They
Yeah.
are certifying the votes that all the states have collected and have submitted and at that point had counted maybe a dozen times. Spent millions of taxpayer dollars recounting and counting and counting and recounting. And that was just supposed to be all right, well, you know, does everybody agree that these states did their due diligence? Say yes, and then that's it. It's certified.
Right. Yeah.
Somewhere along the lines, to a large group of people, that day kind of signified the last chance of, you know, in their minds, like the last day of the Republic of the United States of America. So in my mind, it was just supposed to be a formality. I was at work. I wasn't thinking anything of it. I can remember though, at like 2:00, one of my coworkers telling me that they had broken through the barriers and were storming the Capitol. And then I started watching, believe David Pakman was also what I watched, but really anything I could get my hands on, because it was, I'm trying to think of a word to describe how I felt that day. I was really embarrassed. I was just really embarrassed as an American. I was embarrassed.
For sure.
Yeah. Like, hope no one sees this. Hopefully this doesn't make the news. For me, I just woke up like, you know, like any other day. I was anticipating watching something because I knew there was going to be a rally that day. I figured this is their last attempt to do, you know, this is their last ditch effort. You know, what does the last ditch effort of the Trump mob look like? You know, we're going to find out. And, you know, the 6th, they had, you know, been talking about it. That's going to be the day. And so I didn't know what to expect, if anything. Seemed just as likely that there's a lot of hoorah and then they go home. But that was not the case. As it stands, you know, that morning of January 6th, there was a large group of people already descending on the Capitol while Trump was giving his Stop the Steal rally speech.
Right.
There was already people heading that way. And yeah, 20 minutes before his speech even ended, they had already gone to attack the Capitol. They had already broken through the barriers. And one of the things that I noticed right away was the lack of police presence. And I remember thinking, how the hell are there only like 5 guards here? Why are there only 5 people, 6 people? You know, didn't anybody think this was going to be a bit more? Don't they need some backup? And so it seemed, you know, strange, to say the least, that there wasn't any, you know, any sort of reinforcements in that regard.
Right.
But, you know, right before they get to the Capitol, before they really break through, I think to realize how it got to this point, you have to go back 4 years at least and look at where it all began. You know, how it came to this point. And I would say that for me, Trump in October of 2016 was claiming election fraud. He's looking at the polls. It wasn't looking good. Hillary was in the lead. It looked like a foregone conclusion that she was going to win it. Robert Mueller had, you know, something to say about that with the release of her, I believe it was her emails. but it for the most part, it looked like Trump was done in October. And he claims election fraud done. He says, if I lose, it's fraud. And when he won, it's no longer fraud. So it's okay. No big deal.
Of course.
Fraud.
Yeah, the American people have spoken when you win.
Right. When he wins. Exactly.
Right.
And not even a mention of fraud or anything of the sort. I think, and since the day of his announcement for the presidency, I mean, he's incited violence from his speeches and his rallies. I've seen, there's clips of him. There's somebody, a protester at one of his rallies, and he's telling people to, punch that guy's lights out. That back in the day, they put him out on the street, and people are just,
I remember that.
Exciting, getting more excited, the mindless crowd, just the mob mentality. He really played to that. That's his shtick, from the
he tapped into the anger that mostly middle to lower income white men have been feeling probably for 20 years.
Yeah.
And what started out as sort of like just a small group of people that hated Obama because of his skin color, snowballed into a large enough group of people to elect a president.
And ones who probably didn't vote and then had their, reason to vote. Now they've got their guy. He talks like me. He's not a politician. He's an outsider.
Right.
He understands. It's just nonsense because, you take 2 seconds. It's Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump.
Right.
The
right.
reality.
He was conning all of it. He
Yeah.
was exploiting uneducated people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's his bread and butter for sure. I think in the first thing of business for the Donald Trump administration was to repeal Obamacare. Repeal and replace. They've been talking about it for years. The Republicans have been talking about replacing Obamacare for years, but they never really have like a plan. It's always, we just want to get rid of it. What are you going to replace it with? Well, then it ends up being a lot like Obamacare anyway, with only a few things removed. The only thing that I know that they got rid of successfully was if you don't have Obamacare, paying on your taxes, paying a penalty for that. They got rid of that, so people didn't have to pay. And the thing is that they almost repealed and replaced Obamacare. But do you know the senator that shot it down? John McCain. It all came down to John McCain, and
yeah, that's right.
Showed up and he gave a thumbs down.
He gave a thumbs down. Yeah.
Gasp in Congress because people couldn't believe it. He shut that down, and after that point, Trump actively attacked not John McCain. Actually, he attacked Mitch McConnell on Twitter and other places too. Talk about how it was his fault that it failed. It was his doing. And
let me just stop you, pause you for a second though. Like I've never understood how thinking about Trump's base, and we've already said they're the uneducated. They're also probably the people that would benefit the most from Obamacare.
Right. Well,
so I never understood why they would be voting against their own best or self-interests. I've never understood that.
America has a rich history of voting against its own self-interests. Things that would, this is going to help you guys out. No, fuck that. We don't. Are you kidding me? We'd rather do it the hard way or, the suicidal way almost. Like, no. This is much better.
It's a pride thing. I've worked alongside people that have told me that they did not want universal health care. They didn't, and they needed it. They desperately need, but they didn't want it because it was a handout.
Right. There's a certain almost like a frontier sort of feeling where it's if what I mean by that is like it's Americans, a lot of them, a large portion of them feel that life is a gamble and everything should be a risk and you shouldn't have any safety nets. And it's almost like Darwinism in a way, where there's the strong survive. If you can't make it, then you can't make it. And that's just the way of the way of the world.
That's
not
how a
just-
lot of countries operate, Chris.
Yeah, that's how they. That's there's an underlying thing to that, and there's something about that, something to that to an extent. So I think that they go off that a lot too. So I think one of the first instances when I really realized that aside from electing a reality TV star, used car salesman sort of deal, in August 11th, 12th, 2017, you guys remember Charlottesville, right? The Unite the Right protest.
Absolutely.
Where they,
yeah.
White supremacists, neo-Nazis gathering around with their tiki torches from Lowe's and Home Depot. A white supremacist guy named James Alex Fields drove his car into counter protesters and killed somebody, injured 35. I think when asked about that by the press, Trump responded with saying, "What about the alt left that came charging at the alt right?" And he's like, "Do they have any semblance of guilt?" Because as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible day, but there's blame on both sides. There's very fine people on both sides.
I remember him saying that. Yeah.
Now, that statement by a president is outrageous. Outrageous to say that, to think that would even be possible, and that he wouldn't get fucking buried. But not only, this doesn't compute. Like, it just, I don't know how that works out. That's a career suicide. Anybody else says that,
right?
If you go to your job,
I do think in this country we do have to sort of reconcile with this. I know it's important. It's fundamentally important to the United States that freedom of speech exists and that everybody has the right to their own opinion and their own beliefs and can say those things. But I also think that if you are a Nazi, I can punch you in the face.
Yeah, seems fair.
Right.
That's it. I don't even have to ask. I'll just do it.
Right.
We've already fought that battle.
Right.
You lost.
Yeah.
This is payment, perpetual payment. Just punching Nazis.
I really believe that. I had a grandfather who fought Nazis in Europe. Why am I still having to hear about that bullshit?
Yeah.
It's a failed idea. It doesn't belong here.
Right. Yeah. I have no problem with punching of Nazis. And I support that. I
also support the punching of Nazis as well.
We need to make it normal. We need to normalize it. If you're going to come up to me and tell me you're a white nationalist or a neo-Nazi, then we have nothing else to talk about. And if I want to punch you in the face, it's not assault. Your ideas are dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
You say not as dangerous as my fists, and then you punch him. But
Sit down and think about it. That's basically what I would say. Knock his ass out.
You should have a punch a Nazi day. Just make it a federal holiday. Everyone just goes out and find.
Yeah. America can definitely capitalize.
Just add it to I don't know what the law says about assault, but just like an amendment that says, but if that person was a Nazi, they can't press charges.
Yeah. And if they say, "Oh no, I'm not a Nazi," but they've got all this paraphernalia, sorry, buddy.
If you're at a white nationalist parade,
right,
then I'm going to assume you are a Nazi. Just like if you are storming the Capitol and you're wearing Trump gear,
right?
I'm going to assume you're a Trump supporter.
All right, exactly. Not Antifa.
Right. So this was actually after Trump, the very fine people comments. Is Republicans, some of them actually went against the president, and for not condemning white supremacy, said it was, but that was the last time they ever did. Because after that, he just goes after any Republicans that said anything against him, and he actively props up people that are running for, people that are running campaigns that Republicans that he favors and that favor him. And so if you're a Republican that said anything bad about him not condemning white supremacy, well, your career's shut. Shit, it's gone.
Well, it's not in regarding to white supremacy necessarily, but in regards to the January 6th attacks, Liz Cheney, a Republican, he shut down basically because she spoke out against Trump and how he incited the riots.
Yeah. Right, and she's not since, I think not since then. I mean, Liz Cheney and John McCain are
Oh
one
yeah,
of the few Republicans that actively stood against Trump. But
Mitt Romney as well.
Mitt Romney,
I remember
but those,
watching that speech. That was good.
a lot of those, like even Lindsey Graham, for Christ's sake, he went
Right,
against. He's
right.
like, I've had enough of this. It's happening. Count me out. You know, I was just fucking around for the first 3 years. Holy shit, wasn't expecting this.
Right.
Count me
Yeah.
out, people. And bullshit. And he's right back in it. So um, after the
Yeah.
Republicans did, like, they went against him, and he went after them afterwards. The Republicans that
Right.
were loyal to Trump win those elections, and then at that point, it became, we better keep our mouths shut, because if we say anything, we're not going to be in Congress any longer. And at that
Right. Who
point,
was the?
I would say that
Sorry.
he.
Who was okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
Oh no,
I
you're
didn't
right.
mean to interrupt you.
No, you're right. It's I was just gonna say that was the last time that really anybody said, and it just enabled the rhetoric. That's all it did. And from that point,
Right.
it became
Yeah.
the party of Trump.
Mhm.
And yeah, in 2019, I believe it was, moving along here, Joe Biden. I mean, there was rumors about him running for president, and it seemed likely, the best case scenario, that of all the people that could have ran for president under the Democrat banner, he would be the one most likely to succeed. Even though personally, I'd like others
Sure.
to run
Yeah.
and do well, but it just,
Mhm.
Biden's just popular.
He's just gonna get the most voters. I mean, that's pretty much about it.
So Trump decides to give calls to world leaders for dirt, and a
Right.
transcript from a phone call between Trump and the president of Ukraine, who's in the news a lot. He's doing some
Mhm.
pretty remarkable things. Zelensky, his name, former comic, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Is the transcript's
on
uncovered in
TV.
September
He actually played the
2019.
president. He
And
actually
he is
played
the
the president
president.
on TV. So yeah.
Oh man, is that life imitating art? I don't know.
Yeah.
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 Well done.
Yeah. I'd say so.
So yeah, the transcript is recorded saying, he was withholding provisions, military assistance that they desperately needed, in order for them to dig up dirt, find out stuff about Joe Biden, and the line verbatim, like, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the AG, Barr at the time, William Barr, would be great. That's the president. And again, it just, that's Nixon level of, like, that's almost like a Watergate shit. Like, okay, well, he's gone. You
Right.
just can't
Right.
be doing that. It
Mhm.
just breaks every unwritten rule, and I suppose that's why he breaks them, because they're unwritten. But he breaks every rule that he can. He bends everything that.
Right.
can.
Well, but I want you to remember that it's so hypocritical, because the Republican Party essentially crucified Hillary Clinton over some emails during the
Mhm.
Benghazi incident, which wasn't a great event. I'm upset by it, but she didn't deserve what she received.
Right.
It was over an overcorrection. So I don't know. And then you have somebody like Trump who, yeah, he's admitted that he could shoot someone in like Times Square and walk away without anybody doing anything about it.
That he wouldn't lose any votes.
Yeah.
He
Exactly.
gained votes.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, it's just so hypocritical, and that's coming from somebody who I vote pretty split ticket. I go kind of even down Democrat and Republicans, but I can't, if it's somebody, I think I heard you guys talking about this. If it's somebody who is, bent the knee to Trump and his base, I can't support that.
Right. Then there's still a number of them. And the QAnon, there's QAnon people in Congress now. QAnon, madness. Just I don't know how. God, if they, I was always told that you needed to go to school, have a degree, you need to have some sort of education, some sort of maybe a precursor to being in Congress, some sort. I didn't realize you could just be batshit crazy, and you get enough votes, and yeah, let's bring them in, see what the hell they're about. The people that think that I don't know, Democrats eat babies on the weekend.
It comes back to the basic human need of belonging. I mean, I've told you this before, is people, kids, we talk about kids all the time, but adults too need to feel like they belong somewhere. And whether that's a positive or a negative space, they're going to find one somehow, some way, because we're just social creatures and that's what we want to do. So that's why I like doing a podcast together with your friends. I think it's a positive way to kind of go about your day. But going to the dark web and talking about how certain representatives of this country eat children, maybe a negative way, negative way to go about it.
Maybe not the best way going about it. Yeah, I know. Right. I don't know how so basically they wake up in the morning, they open the web browser, and they find that more babies have been eaten, more children have been sold into sex slavery. Democrats have an alliance with Satan, and they've got to get some groceries. They've got to I got to go about my day, and I got all this shit going on. I don't know how that all works out. I don't know how you work that together and live like it's like that's the same world. Make sure you get that gallon of milk and don't talk to anybody wearing a D for the Democrats. So
I don't know if you want to go there, Chris, but I'm going to go there. A lot of people in this country believe there's a giant white guy in the sky. Who cares about them? And
it's
not that far of a jump for me to understand why they might believe in these prophecies of Q. That's not a crazy leap.
Right. Well, you're touching a lot of Steve. You're touching a lot on what I got coming up in a bit here. It deals with people wanting to belong. What is that? Where does that come from? It's a basic human need, for socializing. That we want to be part of something, feel important in that regard. It doesn't matter what it's about as long as we're all together. They could be just as long as there's some sort of communion with their ideology, just their thought process. You feel the same way I do. Okay, good. Or you're angry. So am I. Hey, let's get together. But the House. I'm sorry. On December 18th, 2019, Trump is impeached. And for the first time, I actually hear about COVID, and that was at the end of December. I remember hearing about it, and not thinking too much of it. Thought it was a bit, that sucks, and hopefully that doesn't come here. But we saw what happened with that. And the House votes to impeach the president based on the transcript, but he's later acquitted in the Senate, and that just enables him further. So
you said that was December of 2019?
Yeah, December 18th of 2019, Trump is impeached for the first time.
Because what happened right after that, this is what I remember, is I don't even remember the impeachment at all, because I was in Peru at the time, and there was North Korea was getting ready to bomb us or something. You remember that story?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Because I was worried about getting stuck in Peru because of nuclear warfare going on. And it seems like it was convenient that came up right after he got impeached.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I think there was a time that Trump was going after Iran, and everyone was worried that he was going to start attacking Iran, and then here we are again. And I'm thinking this is just crazy. He's going after Iran because he attempting to get weapons of mass destruction. I'm not sure where we've heard this before. We gotta get this Middle Eastern country because they're getting those weapons. But Iran, from what I understand, it doesn't have the ability to pose any threat to us. It's basically the bully picking on the weak kid in class, and that's what it amounts to. And then North Korea, Trump decides to, he goes to North Korea. Him and Kim Jong-un have a lovely relationship, write love letters to one another. It's really sweet. but it's it's North
Was it a
Korea.
non-platonic relationship?
I think it was open. They were free to see other dictators.
Okay, I
It
see.
wasn't, you don't have to stick with me. I get it.
Okay.
Um, but at the end of the after he's acquitted in the Senate, Trump holds a press conference, if you remember, and he holds up a paper from the Washington Post saying Trump acquitted. And he's just basking in the glory of the fact that, he made a call to a president in Ukraine withholding military assistance for dirt on a political opponent, and he just got acquitted. He's free to do whatever he wants. All it does is just empower him more.
Oh
And
yeah.
at that point, he not only does this ridiculous appearance, but he makes it even more absurd. Let me top this, he says in like 5 minutes. And he goes out onto the street, crosses the street, and there's a protest going on about him getting acquitted. And in the middle of that protest, he walks across the street to a church and he holds up a Bible, upside down, by the way, and takes photos there for like an impromptu photo op, for reasons, just to show his base that he's still the Christian man. And
yeah, he could barely even hold that Bible. I mean,
right.
when he looked like he didn't even know what he was doing.
Wasn't it as a result of that too that he started to withhold aid to Ukraine because he was mad at them?
I didn't read anything about that, but you know what? I wouldn't put it past him.
Which seems important right
Right.
now.
Right.
Right. Well, I knew then it was like $400 million worth of military aid.
Yeah, it was considerable, and they needed it.
Yeah.
And that just begs the question, who was that for exactly? Why was that necessary?
Right.
Right.
And that's part of where we are right now. It's the views on Russia as being a Republican have changed considerably. And it's almost, flipped. In the days of Reagan, it was the evil empire. Even Reagan came around.
Right.
Even Reagan came around to it, though. Now Gorbachev, I think, Gorbachev. He was a different leader than Russia was normally used to having. So it just so happened to work out in that regard. I mean, there's a whole thing with Reagan. We almost got rid of nuclear arms. We were almost there,
Right,
but he
wanted to
give up Star Wars. He wouldn't give up Star Wars.
Yeah.
A bullshit initiative that wasn't going to work in the first place. Thanks a lot, Reagan.
Right.
But yeah, the attitude has changed towards Russia, and now they're pro-Russian, and they're almost like anti-Ukraine, and they've weakened their stance on being pro-Ukraine. The Republicans have for the last handful of years, and that's come ahead now. So I mean, when you get Trump openly praising Putin, not as it was to the point like when I remember when George Bush said he liked Putin because he looked into his eyes and saw his soul, and he wore a cross, and so he knew he was a man of faith. And it just
incredible stuff.
Incredible, insightful man that George Bush is. Insightful, So
I will. I'll be the voice of opposition here, maybe, in that I know I went to school with kids from Russia. I'm friends with people from Russia. A lot of Istok, which is the far east side of Russia. Most of them closer to Korea and Japan than it is Moscow by far. But and they were pretty affluent. That's why they were here. But they adore and love Putin.
Right.
And I can question that as an American citizen. Maybe that it's propaganda. Maybe it's because they're wealthy, etc. And there's a lot of people that have it a lot worse in that country. But anybody that I've talked to, which is going to be kind of the demographics that I've already mentioned, they love him over there. Now, I don't know how they feel about this war because I haven't talked to them since it started. But for my whole life, the people in Russia have always supported Putin. I know there's a lot of talk about the elections being, not free and fair and all this stuff, but the people I talk to seem to be generally okay with Putin. So thought I would put that out there to be kind of fair and not too imbalanced.
I get you. Not surprised that there's a lot of people that like Putin. There's a considerable amount of people that like, Donald Trump. and a lot of them are
Right, but this,
not very well off, or some of them are. And despite his numerous attacks on democracy, free speech, the press, and others, they still support him. So that's just how it is. He has his base. That's Putin's base. I mean, there's talk. I remember there's talk of him poisoning I believe it was a journalist, someone who spoke out in opposition to him. These people just mysteriously end up dying. One of the things that he's a psycho is he plays hockey with other Russian players, and he plays in these like quote unquote charity hockey games, which are just basically to feed his ego. He scores like 9 goals a game. Nobody checks, and he doesn't do anything. He's allowed to just go up and down the ice. He's like the Russian winger.
I think
so ridiculous.
We have to represent and recognize the culture there, right? And compare him to his predecessors. Putin compared to Stalin, there's not a comparison. Stalin was a monster.
Right.
Khrushchev, same thing.
Right.
Gorbachev, maybe you're starting to get closer, but if you compare him to pretty much anybody who's been in charge of that country prior to him, he is a saint.
Boris Yeltsin,
at least since the USSR was formed, he's a saint. Boris Yeltsin, I don't know a lot about, other than Putin replaced him, right? So
Putin replaced him, right? It was unexpected too. People figured Boris Yeltsin was going to stick around, and Putin was a member of the KGB, which makes a lot of people, uneasy. I know that, but it's different. It's a different culture. I would love to talk to somebody who lives in Russia. That
wasn't Bush Senior part of the CIA? I mean, isn't?
Yeah, he was the head.
There's precedent.
He was the head of the CIA.
You can compare their qualifications, probably.
Yeah. To continue on with after the Bible holding impromptu photo op, I mean, COVID, gets considerably worse from January to March. And after March, I believe that's when they started, maybe it was April, they started, doing lockdowns and closing things down. And we realized we were in for the long haul. And this upsets a number of people who don't want to be locked in their homes. They don't like to wear masks. They don't like any of this, So Donald Trump incites his supporters to attack governors who have implemented restrictions due to COVID by tweeting like, liberate Minnesota, liberate Virginia, and then he goes to one, he says, liberate Michigan. And it's that's the one that really did it, because there was actually a group of militias men, I'm gonna call it, in Michigan, men and women, I think, that decided to hatch a plan to abduct the governor, Gretchen Whitmer. They were found out by the FBI before they could act, but they were meeting in secret. They were gathering people to go to the Capitol and abduct the governor. Where have we heard this before? And that's in what, April, May of 2020. And so, the FBI stepped in and, nipped it in the bud, but you could see there's an underground, there's a swelling now of people rising up, and the presidential election starts essentially in that summer, with debates and town hall meetings and all that shit. It's going. I mean, I remember the debates between Trump and Biden were just the shouting matches. Nothing got accomplished. It was just a shit show, a complete shit show, an entertaining shit show for me. I remember watching that first debate and just being like, well, I guess this is this is what it's going to take to be a president. I could be fucking president. Anyway.
Right, yeah. If this is what it takes, I could be the fucking president. Yeah.
This is where the bar's at. Let me give it a shot.
Wow.
No.
Right.
So, I don't. Terrible. I don't want to. Fuck that job. The presidential election starts, and I remember when the election started. It started in favor of Trump. All the votes are coming in. It all looked like, for a good 12 hours there, I was like, fuck, we're getting 4 more years.
Well, yeah, you're missing we had like a month or 2 lead up of mail-in voting and whether or not that was legal and should be accepted. And
Right.
But Republicans would argue, no, you have to show up, you have to be there, and Democrats were like, but there's a pandemic.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I was this is due to the mail-in ballots because they didn't get counted. They got the votes of people that showed up got counted first, which is overwhelmingly in support of Trump.
people that didn't believe in COVID, would show up.
Yeah. Science. There's probably a, what do you call it? Venn diagram between people of who showed up to vote and are flat earthers. There's probably something there. It's just madness. But after the mail-in ballots start coming in, Joe Biden starts gaining on the president. Not only that, he overtakes him in a number of different states that Trump figured he was going to win. Which out of all the ways for this guy to go down, it just seems like, God, that's going to be one that's just going to set him off even more. I mean, he's going to get pissed off anyway because he's losing. And then again, and once he starts realizing he's losing, just like he did in 2016, he starts claiming fraud. And he has a team of lawyers that filed, erroneous lawsuits in battleground states. Just that lawsuits that are never going to make it to the light of day. They're just going to get thrown out.
I have a deep-seated conspiracy belief about both his first time getting elected and then the second time getting elected, in that I thought it was very strange in 2016 how pretty much all the states he was supposed to lose by double digits, he ended up winning by about 10 to 12%. And there was a lot of talk at the time about Russian interference. And then we start to look at some of the things Trump did while he was in office. We mentioned the one about withholding aid to Ukraine and how that's, certainly panned out for Mr. Putin, as well as there's other things, I'm sure. But then we start looking at the election in 2020, which we knew, hey, if there is Russian interference, we can't let that happen again. So I think there was a lot, there was a lot more attention paid to how those results were tallied and security of the votes. I know that the mail-in process was debated as being insecure, but we've been doing it for a long time and it's been fine. So it was just going to be at a higher level, higher volume than ever before.
You were a poll worker. Did you see any fraud? What did you see in the polls?
So I was the Democratic supervisor of a poll station in Indiana. And I think I've mentioned this to you guys before. In Indiana, if you are a split ticket voter, you are a Democrat. And in my case, you are the supervisor, the Democratic guy in charge of your polling station. And there were at least 2 errors that happened while I was there. Both of those were machine or mechanical errors. And you do have a backup manual way to tally because if you remember, we haven't always had machines for elections.
Right.
And had to do it by hand for a long, long time. So in the case of a machine breaking, you then, you have the manual, the hard copy vote that you put in a basket and you collect until the machine is repaired. And they'll send out repairmen that day. They have people that's their job is if the machine goes down, you call the central station or whatever, and they send out a repair guy. So, and within an hour he was there and he fixed it and the machine was running again. I would say that happened maybe twice. And so not only I have to sign off on these incidents when they happen. It's not like, oh, they happen and we don't document. It all gets documented.
Yeah.
I have to find the Republican specialist or supervisor. Her and I have to be there while the guy fixes it. And we have to go step by step through a checklist of what happens with those ballots and make sure that they get counted. And then we both have to sign off on it. So there is all kinds of safety measures in place that I don't think you realize unless you're a poll worker.
Right. Exactly. That's what I figured you'd give some insight to how that all goes, about how that all works. Just seemed like, and at the end, one of the last things that he did after his lawsuits, he called the Georgia officials. If you remember this conversation, where he's just seeing if they can drum up 11,700 some odd votes so he can win Georgia. He's like, we're talking about 11,000 votes here, people. You can't get me 11,000 votes. This is the president. And the president, he doesn't give a shit because he's already been acquitted for something that's clearly a violation in some fashion. From the very moment that he announced his intent to run for presidency, he's just been pulling the same shit for years. And it's just gotten to a point where he just doesn't care. He's so out in the open with it because he feels he can get away with anything. And he's probably right to a certain extent. But, at some point, you've got to stand up to him. So for 4 years, stirring up vitriol, divisiveness, mistrust, hatred against American institutions, it all comes to head on January 6th. I mean, they kept pushing past the goalpost further. Like you were saying earlier, they're going to, in a couple weeks, you guys will know in a couple weeks. They're still doing that, by the way. The My Pillow guy, he's pushing you guys are going to find out everything in a couple weeks. This date, this is when we're going to overturn the election. It was fraud, and all that stuff. And then that January 6th date just keeps popping up because it's the day they certify the election. It's really just ceremonial. The vice president is there, and he's just there to, see that everything's going smoothly. They could almost get a dummy and just put it there, just like, the pull string. Just, that's totally the vice president. Same deal, that's as much as he's really needed to an extent. It's all just, like I said, ceremonial. There's nothing really to it, but they use that as the last ditch effort, and so they have a Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. And in his speech, Trump tells his supporters that they need to fight like hell for their country. Rudy Giuliani, lovely man, declares trial by combat. Shit fucker. I mean, what the hell? Trial by combat. What an asshole. Right. Fuck that guy. Yep. You go do it. Crypt right. Keeper. The Crypt Keeper is calling for trial by combat. Fuck off, man. And he incites the crowd to go to the Capitol building. And I love that he insists that I'll be right there with you. I'll be right there. No, he won't. Right. No, he won't. Oh, he didn't. Yep. Where was he? Not to be seen.
You got to understand what they're not saying these things because they are ridiculous, but they're not. Yeah. It's not ridiculous to them because they're operating from a place of desperation.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
This is it to them. They are about to, and I know they weren't going to lose power that day because I think it was going to be another 2 weeks until Biden gets actually installed. But that is the last gasp. It's crazy to me though that like Giuliani specifically, who is a lawyer,
right,
didn't understand that the process is over. I mean, there's nothing short of a coup that topples our democracy that could have happened that day. Nothing legal could have happened that day to overturn the results. Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So there were actually talks all throughout social media and all over the place of, raiding the Capitol before his speech, So like, as soon as he said that, it was almost like it was giving them the okay. So they're just like already going.
Yeah, I mean,
that you mentioned that there were people already there, and some of those people were Proud Boys. Most of them were Proud Boys.
That's an excellent segue into our next little discussion here. And say before the speech is even over, chaos has already begun. It's yeah. Let's see if I can.
Yeah. And there was a group called the Oath Keepers that were there as well.
Oh, the Oath Keepers, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember them. Oh my God.
These are all these different groups to me. I mean, I know they're different and they did different things, responsible for different things, but they're all extremists. They're all extreme elements of that Trump base that I've talked about. I want to clarify before we get into this anymore that I work with and know a lot of Trump supporters who voted for him and supported him and still support him based on what he did in office, not on his character, not on his actions on January 6th. So, and they are good people.
Right.
I want to be clear that they are a lot. Most of the Trump base is good people. there are these extreme elements, just as there are on the left, that are mostly responsible for this heinous bullshit that we talk about on the news.
Well, we are talking about January 6th, so we're not talking about ordinary.
There were a lot of people there, though, on January 6th that didn't.
That didn't do. Yeah, that were just ordinary people.
Yes.
Yeah. But we're talking about like the insurrection itself, like the people that were really responsible for it,
I think, I too know a lot of Trump supporters. I mean, living in Indiana, you don't have to look too far. And a lot of them are, they're good people. They essentially, they got conned. It does happen that, people have been, I don't know anybody that hasn't been conned in some way by some salesman of some sort, whether a big purchase or small. It just, however it takes, whatever form it takes. I know lots of people that have had one pulled over on them. It happens. But it's just, I'm hoping that it's finally, going against him. Finally, hopefully they're waking up and realizing that this guy's not what they hope he is, what they think he is, and that, to support him, to be a pro-Trump in any way is like almost the equivalent of being, what do you call it, like a neo-fascist, just a Nazi, a white supremacist. It's almost to that level, maybe just a smidge underneath.
I don't know if Trump's. I think the image of him being untouchable and never lose, I think that's been shattered. I think that's been broken. I hate to make this comparison because I like Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders, when he ran for the Democrat primary against Hillary Clinton, drew some huge crowds and was wildly popular for about 6 months, was just dwarfing even Trump's, I think, crowds and attendance that he was having during the same time frame. And I really thought if Bernie ran again in 2020, that they was going to be his in a nutshell, because it was, he had those big crowds. Well, by the time 2020 rolled around, he was 4 years older and not as cool.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that is what we're going to see with Trump. That's my prediction. He's 4 years older and not as cool.
People are getting tired of his shtick. It only lasts for so long.
I don't know if they're tired of it, but there's going to be somebody cooler.
Right. Well, it's just not as it doesn't have the same pizzazz as it once did.
Right.
It's gone stale.
Well, with that being the case, would you suspect that the Republican vote would then be pretty split?
That was my assumption. I remember I actually asked David Pakman on his show once what he thought about, because I had this theory that the Republican Party would basically be split in two, with people that are pro-Trump, that are loyal to Trump and not the party, and people that are just loyal to the party. And that, in a sense, is going to split the vote, much in the same way that a third party split the vote in other presidential elections, like 1992. It's the reason Bill Clinton won wasn't only the fact that the economy was in shambles, but that Pat Buchanan ran as another Republican, opposed to George Bush, and Ross Perot, the guy who loves his graphs, the guy from little guy from Texas, billionaire from Texas, and they just ate away at the votes that would normally have gone to George Bush. And so if a political party is split in any way, they don't win. They have to be unified in one goal if you hope to get power in this country. It's just, you can't be split that way. And so there's a good chance that the Republican Party is split that way, because there's a lot. I mean, if you look at the CPAC convention that's going on, or I think it's still going on, it's just, it's a congregation of just the nuttiest fucking people, where a number of things they're talking about are just complete horseshit. It's just such obvious shit that, come on, that's not true. What are you doing?
I think that's a great example, or a great predictor of what's to happen. I think you have an election like this is where the pendulum's going to swing the other way. I think we talked about this before, where when we were younger, when we were just starting out voting, voter apathy was the biggest concern. People weren't voting. People didn't care. There wasn't, it was a worry that we were so far below 50% participation that we weren't even getting like accurate results of who was going to be president. Because I couldn't even remember who like Bush Jr. ran against his second term.
Oh, John Kerry.
Yeah. It took me a long time to remember that. I think the pendulum has swung the other direction, and now everybody votes and everybody has an opinion and everybody wants to make sure their vote counts. I think it'll swing back the other way, probably starting now. And you'll have an election kind of like Perot, Bush, Clinton, where the Republican vote's going to get split. And, Kamala, I don't think Biden's going to run again. I think Kamala just gets in because the other party is split. And
I don't know if she's popular enough to get in. I think that
it won't matter if the other party's split.
That's true. That's very true. That's a good point.
Yeah, that is very true. They could pick anybody and they'd fucking win.
When the bar's been set so low, they literally could pick anybody.
They could roll the dice on anybody.
Yeah, fuck it. You want to be president? Why not? Give it a shot.
Right.
It might be a little controversial, but I think a black woman president in 2022 looks like a pretty good candidate.
Yeah,
for sure.
Just on, because we don't, it's not a meritocracy anymore. So
yeah,
she fits the bill. She's a black woman. She can be president.
There it is.
But that's my prediction, is that we'll have an election in 2024 where the Democrat gets in basically by default because the Republicans are having their reckoning. And then after that, we're going to start to go full fledged towards nobody wants to vote anymore because they're all pissed off that their vote doesn't count. And you're going to get right back into 10 years from now where nobody votes at all.
Yeah. Which
is its own set of problems. It's not a good thing. Voter apathy is not a good thing. It's just different problems.
Yeah, I think Reagan, he was elected in 1980, and from 1980 to 88, and then from 88 to 92 was George Bush. So you had 12 years, was it, of just Republican leadership, and it all, it all. You've got that much. You've got other Republicans that want to throw their hand in it, and that's what happens. You get a split base. So in January 6th, like I said, like 20 minutes before that speech on the Stop the Steal even ends, a group of people that are mostly Proud Boys are walking towards the Capitol. I'm curious, what is your guys' opinion? What's your definition of a Proud Boy? What is a Proud Boy? Based on what you've seen. I can give you the Wikipedia after.
Right.
Give me my own personal. Supposedly, they say they don't beat up the women. They don't beat up women. And I love that one of the guys I saw said that they don't go against the United States while on his way to the Capitol. Go against the United States.
Well, yeah, I would definitely label them traitors for sure.
Yeah.
They're militant traitors, just extremist groups, like Steele is saying. Right-wing extremist groups that are basically probably more than likely white nationalists. They're throwing up white power signs all the time. So
Steve, do you have a definition, a personal definition of a Proud Boy?
I think I agree with everything Nick said, but I'm going to go from their perspective. What I think they believe they are is a well-regulated militia that has to bear arms and defend this country. But I do want to say that I agree with me personally agree with what Nick said. I just didn't want to repeat it, but I do think that they feel that they were in the right. It's not that they are operating under this guise that they are the fringe and that they're going to cause problems. They thought they were doing the right thing.
Right. They're basically the walking personification of the Second Amendment. If you could take the Second Amendment and put that into a person, it would be a Proud Boy.
Right. Anthropomorphized.
Yeah, exactly. What would that look like? Proud Boy. Okay. So yeah, the Proud Boys on Wikipedia is an American far-right neo-fascist. It's an exclusively male organization. It's no women in the Proud Boys. You're not allowed. which seems a bit sexist, but it is what it
It
is.
should be said too that that's just
Running proud
one,
people.
I'm sure, of many. That's not like we mentioned the Proud Boys because we've heard the name and we know the
Well,
name. But
they
I'm
were
sure
there.
they were there.
Yeah, that's the reason that I'm
I was mentioning the Oath. I was mentioning the Oath Keepers as well.
Yeah.
Earlier.
And
And also
QAnon.
the QAnon.
Yeah,
QAnon as well. Yeah.
And so the Proud Boys, they felt the election was stolen. So they marched to the Capitol, wearing Trump attire and screaming "fuck Antifa" and chanting 1776. Now there's a thing in America where our history is so ingrained into our upbringing that we're constantly beat over the head with how we overthrew the government that was, over many different reasons, but and how we fought for our own selves and picked up our rifles and decided to make our own stake in the world. And we've now have the greatest country that ever existed ever, anointed by God and all that. It's just that this thought, this mentality of, you're honoring your ancestors to an extent if you take up arms against any sort of thing, anything you view as oppressive, anything. And anything, it almost is oppressive to a lot of these people. So since we're born, essentially, since we entered, not even grade school, a lot of people's parents reinforce these beliefs. Just this idea that, being anti-government is not only the way to be, it's the way you should be, and that anything coming from the government is oppressive, and it's your right to pick up your rifle and go against it, which obviously it is, but to an extent you've got to put things in perspective here. Things are a bit different in 1776 than they are in 2021. It's you can't, the stuff that worked back in those days and the reasons given for their rebellion are a lot different than the ones given today. There's almost no comparison.
I would push back. I am a pretty big supporter of the Second Amendment. You guys probably don't know that because we haven't really talked about it, but I do believe that it still is relevant and important. I believe all the amendments are relevant and important. I think a lot of groups like the Proud Boys forget that there are other amendments.
But, right.
Well, they stop at 2. That's enough. They've read enough. They got the first and second.
That's as far as they can count.
That's where they go astray, is that they forget that there are other ones.
Yeah. Connect 4 is not a game for them. We got 2. Fuck. We gotta go back to the beginning. It's just that I get the it's almost back to the healthcare, the idea that things should be, life is a risk. You shouldn't have the government have that safety net for you. If you get sick and you die, you get sick and you die. There's a coldness to that whole life, but that's how they feel is the freest way to live. And there's a nugget, and that's the problem, is there's a nugget to truth to a lot of things, but that's all it is. It doesn't make the whole thing. That is, and freedom. Not only that, freedom when it comes to COVID and like what we've seen, our own freedom is our own undoing in a way. The freedom that we beat over our heads and everyone else's. That the idea that we're the freest country. There's a lot of countries that have freedom, but we're the freest country. You ain't gonna tell us what to do. Is exactly what's gonna, COVID's just a dress rehearsal. There's gonna be another virus. There's gonna be another variant. There's gonna be another that just comes along, and it's not gonna be, 1% chance of death or whatever it may be, which is not something to scoff at. There's a lot of fucking people.
It might be wishful thinking on my part, but I would like to think that if COVID, for example, had a 20% death rate, that everyone would have fell in line and behaved differently. I think because it was less than 1%, and it was largely, most people didn't see it or didn't know anybody. Now they do.
Yeah.
Most people do know somebody who has been killed as a result of it. The attitudes have changed. That's my wishful thinking. Maybe I'm wrong.
Dude, I would totally agree with that. I'd hope the same thing. I would definitely have hoped the same thing.
The yeah, so the Proud Boys, to get back to it a bit here. Hopefully, don't get off too far off. Of course, I managed to do that myself. They actually view Trump as their savior, anointed by God, aside from Jesus Christ. So Jesus and Trump are pals. Get their own.
Oh yeah, well,
and they started breaking through the barriers 20 minutes before Trump finishes his speech. I actually believe we'll uncover a lot more about their involvement, and I wouldn't be shocked if members of Congress, along with the president, were involved more personally than originally thought or found out by. It just with everything that we saw. So now we are at January 6th. We're back to that moment where all those people are, breaking through the barrier and they're just pushing cops out of the way, the few that are there. And, it doesn't, at this point, as I'm watching it, I'm nervous. I'm a bit, I don't understand necessarily what they even hope to accomplish. It just seems like it's possible with a mob mentality that they don't even, because that's how it is when you work with mob. In a mob, you just caught up in everything. And one thing happens and everybody just goes towards that. So if it turns violent, everyone's going to turn violent.
I remember how there were several break-ins already. There were people already inside and on the west lawn to where like they do inaugurations, in like that tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
They were still holding, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people all just there fighting with the police. They fought for hours. And those police, due to lack of communication, had no idea that people already got in the Capitol.
Right.
And it was like that all around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, where with the Stop a Steal rally, where things could get out of hand, why are there so few police? And not only that, when it all started going down,
well,
nobody showed up.
Seriously, apparently.
Well, I believe it's all speculative right now, but honestly, I would be beyond. It seems infinitely likely that the president, all he has to do is make one phone call. There's the National Guard there.
Right.
He deliberately didn't do it, and not only he was intentionally withholding.
We were talking about that day. I remember.
Yeah, because it just didn't make any sense. Where the fuck is everyone?
Right, because you'd always think like no one's gonna do anything to the Capitol or even the White House or anything like that, because
we have people on it like that.
Military there, and they'd kill them. They'd die.
Oh, yeah,
they'd get shot and killed.
Nope. Yeah.
Well, it's just, and I think you brought this up at the beginning, is it's just in stark contrast to the events that were happening to Black Lives Matter protests.
Right.
Just like months, even weeks prior to this, is that the second groups that were supporting BLM got on the street, it seemed like the army was there, like in helicopters, like shooting gas at them. Like it was
playing Flight of the Valkyries.
You have this example where there's basically nobody at the state capitol, or sorry, the country's capital, the national capital. And it's like, how is this possible? Right? How?
Yeah. I remember I said that exact same thing. I remember went back when I had a Facebook. I made a Facebook post about what was going on and how crazy it all was. And I asked the question, where the fuck is the military? Where are the more police? How is it so low? No one's guarding this place? If this was a Black Lives Matter protest, the police would be out in droves with their SWAT gear, the riot gear, or whatever it is, and rubber bullets and gas grenades, all that. No problem. But with pretty much all white Stop the Steal rally, it's like 5 police and that's it. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask was, we touched on a bit earlier when it comes to the Proud Boys, is what is the desire for humans to be a part of groups such as the Proud Boys? I mean, is it a symptom of a much bigger problem within our society? It seems to be the case. Although, like I said, like humans, they're social creatures, and we like to be a part of, the groups of people and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
Not all groups are the same. And I think some choices have to be. Yeah. Hold on. Now, what do you guys stand for? No, fuck that. It seems to be like, look, there's such a desire that it almost doesn't matter, as long as it's a group of people that I don't know if they share your values, because like I said, I just don't see. I mean, maybe it's just me. I just cannot fathom if someone came up to me with the Proud Boy pamphlet, join the Proud Boys, and they gave me a list of what they were standing, what they stood for.
Well,
I'd
I think
get
that
the
a
fuck
lot
out
of
of here,
that
man.
has to do a lot of that has to do with your upbringing,
Hmm. Yeah.
like where you were born, where you grew up, who raised you, um, like your
Nature
experience
versus
through
nurture.
life growing up, even like your experience through life growing up and your reactions to it, that kind of formed your own opinions and your own, what I mean, your own way
Right.
about life.
Well, yeah,
I
that's what I was
think
saying.
that's what ultimately, because then there's other people that live a completely different life, obviously, that they handed a Proud Boys pamphlet, they'd highly consider it.
Mm.
Maybe it's the thing they were looking for their whole life.
Yeah, I would kind of go back to what I said about belonging somewhere. And then you just extrapolate a bit and you start looking at statistics, particularly for white men. And these are issues I care about. And I observe, you know, divorce rates are 50, 60%. And then if there's children involved, uh, the the mother is going to win custody 90% of the time. So that creates anger. People men getting taken away from their kids creates anger. So there's part of that. You start talking about just men and women in relationships in general. Sexual activity is way down. So maybe that drives some people insane. You start looking at college degrees and college attendance. White men are going to college less than ever. They're earning less money comparatively, which we could go down a few rungs. I'm self-aware to know that we're making more probably than we should, but we're still making less than we were. And I think that affects some people. There's just you look at suicide rates. Most gun violence in this country is the result of suicide. And for men under 45, it's like the second leading cause of death.
Right.
Is suicide.
Right. Yeah. That's very true. Also, men are the most incarcerated as well.
Men are the most incarcerated. I know there's like this idea that it's not safe for women to go out at night because they might get assaulted. Well, men get assaulted at a much higher rate than women do in public, right. in public spaces.
Yeah, and it's almost like a thing that you do or you're not a man kind of thing.
So there's all of these things that are not talked about enough that we kind of brush now under this umbrella of mental health, which is too broad to be sustainable. But these are all things that add up, that push men into directions you really don't want them to go in. And one of those is groups like this, the Proud Boys that you're describing, where they find a sense of belonging. And it's a gang. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's a good way to describe it. Yeah, it's basically an all men gang. I wonder how many women are in gangs. I mean, I wonder what the ratio is between men and women in gangs. I imagine there's a lot more guys, but it is. There's a number of issues there to unpack. We could talk for hours on just one of them.
Right.
It's and I'm totally down to have more of those conversations on that, but for the moment being, I think I appreciate the input. Best served if we just kind of push ahead here with the actual attack on the Capitol. And like I said, I was also watching Mr. David Pakman, who's gotten like 5 shout outs in this podcast.
Yeah.
But I remember watching it and being a bit, like I said, I was nervous. I didn't really know what the hell the goal was and what they were going to be doing. And then once they start breaking the windows and they start getting into the building and they're just walking around while staying in between the velvet ropes, they made sure to stay in those lines. I thought that was hilarious. They had no idea what the hell to do. All they knew is they were going to the cat. That's the mob mentality.
Yeah,
it's really not a plan.
No one had a floor plan.
It's based on an emotion that just sweeps through everybody. It's almost like when someone else is crying or upset, if you have any sort of empathy at all, you can feel that. You can feel the hurt. You can feel that. You should, I would think. I do. I know that.
Well,
That you
it was an angry mob. The bulk
Yeah.
of the people that were there that were trespassing were just part of an angry mob. I do believe that there is like a top like 1 to 5% of the people that were there with an agenda that was very dangerous.
Right.
But the other 90, 95% were just an angry mob.
I cannot recall. I should have written it down. If Nick, if you can remember the Capitol policeman's name, and a phenomenal job. I believe he got a medal for it, where he actively drew away the crowd from going into the chambers, and he just led them up the stairs to some, that wasn't very brave.
Just amazing stuff, man.
Yeah,
Like
he just
to push that guy and kind of like taunt him a little bit to bring him his way.
Yep.
Like it's just all stuff he probably learned in training, and it just kind of probably all kicked in. And it was really cool to witness that sort of thing.
It's almost
He
like
was
a shepherd
fighting the
sheep.
mob, dude.
Yeah. He's a
Yeah,
shepherd
dude,
sheep.
it was fucking brilliant, dude. I loved it.
Like World of Warcraft, he was just kiting them up.
Oh, he was kiting the mob. Yeah, he really was. Yeah.
Aggroing the whole fucking place.
Dude, he really did, man. Dude, he did an AoE taunt, dude. Everyone came down the hallway.
Oh god, I get to see it like it just like turn. Yeah. Then he follows him up the stairs and pulls him away from like congressmen and women, and just a phenomenal job. I know he got medals for that, as he should have. Just unbelievable bravery.
So good.
And he never fired his weapon.
Right.
He knows as soon as he fires his weapon, he's got 100 or more people that are just going to rip him apart.
But yeah, dude, watching that again though, it was great because you could see like when he had his hand on his weapon and he had his hand out in front of him, and he was yelling, "Stop! Stop!" I feel like he was doing that and like almost just to obviously to get their attention, but I don't think he had any intention of drawing his weapon. I think that was
he would have been killed.
completely.
Yeah. He shoots his gun, he's going to get killed.
Yep.
Right, exactly. But it's so great, man, to see that work out so well.
And
he did great.
As I'm watching it all unfold, and I remember I watched, we all saw 9/11 with the towers being hit, but I never saw the towers being hit in real time. I saw it after the fact. I didn't see the towers collapse in real time. I saw that after the fact.
Yeah.
This, in terms of seeing it in real time, was one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And to watch this crowd of people, this angry mob, just tearing through this building and beating down doors and breaking windows and saying, hang Mike Pence. I don't like Mike Pence. I don't want to be hung. And that's their own guy, and they're going for, Nancy Pelosi. Someone took a shit on her desk. Like, civilized mob. Here we are. But and then you watch them get through, go through all these chambers and get to beautiful, like there's this, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like in the center of the whole place, there's this ceiling. It's got a beautiful painting at the top. Some guy smokes like a joint, and he said like it helped calm people down. It probably did. It probably did.
Yeah, he's like, probably prevented a lot of shit, he said.
It may very well have, because if everyone's just hot, no, because they get there and they just don't know what the fuck's going on, because they don't actually have a plan. Because they just wanted to show, they like shouting 1776, they like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But when it comes down to the actual down to business, what are we going to be doing? They have no plan. And thank Christ they have no fucking plan.
Exactly. Thank fucking Christ.
Because they didn't think that far
would have
ahead.
been to the direction they were originally going, they would have been to the Senate in
here's
they
where
all
it's
charged there.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
They would have just Pence was right there. That would have been it.
What happens it's a hypothetical and it's a horrible hypothetical, but let's say that mob goes right into the Senate floor, gets a hold of Pence. I'm not going to describe what happens to Pence, but what happens if they get there and the room is full of representatives and senators?
Well, they had a noose for him out on the steps outside.
I'm not talking about I know horrible things would happen in that room, but what would be the fallout? What's Trump going to do? What's Trump's plan? Because he's still president of the United States, technically.
Oh man, wow, yeah.
No, I don't. I don't know if there was a plan beyond that, because the idea was that Mike Pence was going to be able to overturn the election, and when he, obviously he can't do that. He just simply can't do that. It's not
Right.
part of how it works. Then they start calling for his head, and beyond that, there's no course of action. Just kind of gets to my next thing here. Is that during the election, or during the insurrection, sorry, during the insurrection, a bunch of buses arrived outside the Capitol building to evacuate the members of Congress, because they were all in a secret hiding spot. They're like,
Right.
they're leaving the room while the people are like down the hall. They're very close to being caught up. And the representative Ruben Gallego, which is a member of the House Democrat from the 7th District for Arizona, they knew that if they left the Capitol, they might never get to come back. That might be it. So if all of Congress leaves the Capitol, there's a
Right.
significant chance they don't come back. So their best
That's how
chance.
coup succeeds, basically.
Oh yeah, that's what he was saying. He's like, the best chance was to stay put with the mob beating down on their door. That's actually your best bet, is to stay where you're at.
Yeah.
So if they had left, the mob certainly would have taken complete control of the Capitol. And the president at that time, Trump, could have then declared martial law. It would have been within jurisdiction. And there's a good reason to believe that was actually the intention all along. That was the intention.
Oh yeah.
So that he could declare martial law, and he could delay the electorate being certified, and with the United States under martial law, and then just rule forever.
Yeah.
The certification of what he called the stolen election, would never take place. He would remain president for, and then give it to his daughter and his son. And then we'd be constantly stuck with Trump's, and it would just be this dictatorship that wouldn't end. And had they left, there's a good chance that's what would happen. But that representative, which if you're looking at maybe up and coming Democrats, I would say check him out. I like him. He's a bit different than others, but I like Mr. Gallego. I think seems like a good guy.
Was he was the Marine, right?
Yep, he served.
The infantryman.
Mm-hmm. So he knows. He seems.
Yeah, that guy.
He's actually
that guy
a soldier. Cool. He knows some shit. He's been around.
Right.
It's people you probably should listen to when it comes to these sort of things. So, that is a frightening thought to imagine how close we could have been to that. That would have been a complete disaster. And I don't even know where we'd be today if they had left, because they were getting ready to leave. The buses were there.
The most frightening part of the day was, I think I was already watching coverage of it online, and people had already broken into the Capitol building and were destroying things and going through the halls, and you could see there was some standoffs with some people and security guards inside the building. And then there was a tweet by Trump that just said, Mike Pence has failed to do what we have asked, and I am not responsible for what happens to him. It was something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And the timing of it couldn't have been worse, because it was at maybe the most critical moment in the Capitol building. And it was almost like he had turned on his vice president and was, whatever happens to him, happens to him. And that was it for me. That was the most frightening part of the day. Once I heard that everybody was safe and was like underground and they were continuing to go ahead and certify the election and all that stuff, I felt a lot better. But there was a good 30 minutes there that day where I was like, this could be it. Like this, they start rounding up members of the Senate and the vice president, and we're looking at Mogadishu. This turns into Mogadishu. Like, I don't want to do that. I didn't want to see that happen. So the fact that it ended the way it did that day is a blessing.
Right.
Right. Oh my gosh, for sure.
A number of the girl that got shot, what's her name, Nick?
Ashley Babbitt.
Ashley Babbitt, that's right. She got shot, and there's a documentary that's out there, and it literally shows her getting shot. It's outside a door. he's got a gun on the other side of the door, guys. And they break the glass. Next thing you know, he pulls it around the corner and just shoots. There she goes. She drops down. And that's it. I mean, she served in the Air Force for what I think they said, like, I don't know, 11 years or something.
14 years.
14 years. And she, just a normal pro, counts for it. Just a normal person. But here she is, and her whole life leading up to this one point, she's on the other side of a door in the Capitol building. She just gets shot, all for Donald Trump. It goes a bit more beyond that, because she would say it's not just for Donald Trump. Then it's for the stolen election. It's for our institutions. But it's all a ruse. Right. It's the promises of a used car salesman. This is what you're putting your faith in.
There are still a lot of people out there that believe the election was stolen. So,
right. Yeah.
And I don't know what you can do. There probably isn't anything you can do to prove otherwise.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's going to change other than just time. Right? Yeah. Time moves on.
Yeah. Maybe at one point they'll, I don't know. Yeah, you hope, but you never know. You never know. I know that, the woman getting shot, just how many, I think it was like 140 injury, like police officers were injured. A handful of them took their own lives. One of the most horrific scenes that I saw in that documentary, I think it was, I don't remember, 4 Hours at the Capitol, I think it's called, was when those two cops, those two friends, his buddy gets pulled into the crowd, and this guy is just, he's taking his stun gun and just shocking the base of his skull, and you just hear him screaming, and it's happening. This is another person, and he has to scream out, "I have kids, I have kids." It says to try and appeal to their humanity, as this crowd is bearing down on him, and it looks like he's, it doesn't look good. He thinks he's dead, and he just screams out, "I have kids," and someone stops the guy that's, shocking him, and they managed to pull him back, and he had a slight heart attack, and he has some brain damage from that, brain trauma from that incident. And one of the guys, his buddy, was also, I believe he was a Marine, and served in Afghanistan and Iraq. And these guys, these wannabe soldiers, are calling him a traitor, and all this shit. And it's just all this nonsense going on. That was one of the most horrific things I'd seen about the whole day.
And I want to follow you up with, okay, I do remember this too, because I remember I was watching David Pakman. David Pakman's a pretty left-leaning talk show host. He's fine. I enjoy his content. I also I do watch some Ben Shapiro, which is sort of the anti-David Pakman. Right. I've watched a little bit of both. But then I remember flipping to Fox News. I remember flipping to Fox News that day. And you know what Fox News was talking about at like 2:30 on January 6th?
Benghazi.
Like the opening of like 3 new rock and roll McDonald's in Minneapolis. That was the lead story on Fox News while the Capitol was being stormed by essentially terrorists. So,
oh my God, we got Big Macs and Big
If you're
Tunes.
a listener to this and you think Fox News is news, you're lying to yourself. And I implore you to just watch, read, talk to anyone else. Do not flip that channel to Fox News, because it is not good for you.
I've listened to some Ben Shapiro, not because I'm going to take what he says, but it's almost like let's see what he says. I'm interested because I think he's right, but what is this motherfucker going to say today? That's kind of where I go.
He's a rational human being. You might not agree with what he says, but he's
to an extent. I think he knows that the shit that he's saying is bullshit. Even he knows that. Just like, although not Alex Jones. Alex Jones, he probably actually thinks that's all true.
I think David Pakman's the same way. I think he goes a little hard to the left sometimes and knows it, but does it anyway.
Right. The thing is, the difference between, I would say, David Pakman, like I said, Ben Shapiro, like a lot of the stuff he says, either he'll hide behind his religion. Well, I'm Jewish, so these, I can say homophobic things. I can do this. But with Pakman, he's usually pretty fair about things. That's from what I've
That's
seen,
true.
honestly. He
No,
gives
for
you
sure.
both sides for the most
Yeah,
part.
he'll even come out and say like, "Hey, I was wrong on this," or
Yeah, he'll
you know,
he'll apologize for being wrong.
Shapiro's not going to do that.
I've never seen
Shapiro's
a
never
Shapiro.
going to do that.
No, I've never seen a Shapiro episode.
Yeah.
I was wrong with Ben Shapiro. That would be an episode that's like 12 hours long.
There's a lot of stuff that Shapiro says that makes sense and it sounds good, but there's a lot of underlying things that he misses that make his arguments invalid.
It's almost it's intended to incite an anger in people. It's just done for shock value, almost to the extent. But he just speaks really quickly.
It seems like
nasally.
shock value to people who disagree with him. I don't know. I don't. Again, you apologizing because you're wrong is one thing, but I think Shapiro will recognize that he's wrong. He may not apologize for it. You're right. I've never heard him apologize for it. I don't know if you need to apologize. People make mistakes. People could be wrong sometimes.
Sure.
I
agree. I think if you're gonna put yourself out there as an informative platform, where people look to me for truth to some extent, if you fuck up, you have to honor that. You have to take responsibility, and I think he dodges a lot. I mean, even on the most basic things, like, will you go to, if you have a friend who's gay and they're getting married, will you go to their wedding? No, I wouldn't go to their wedding. Or if they invited me, I would say no because it's against my religious beliefs. That's all well and fine, but I wouldn't be his friend. Like, I could go fuck off.
I know this wasn't where you wanted your show to go, so I'll let you get back to
no, not at all.
The task at hand.
Yeah.
But Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, fuck that clown. But yeah, if I really did want to talk about Ben Shapiro. But I'm trying to think where I've lost my train of thought here.
If you don't remember, I'm going to start defending Shapiro some more.
Oh no.
Well, the Capitol was attacked.
Right. Essentially, I'm just going to cut. This whole thing's getting cut. But the cut. Hello, sir, cut. So basically, the Capitol attack. I think like I said, it was 4 hours, and finally, after 4 hours or so of this nonsense, Trump finally makes an appearance. He finally makes a video after being begged from his family, from his constituents, from other people in his party. Please, Sir, you've got to do something. You've got to do something. And he finally says, except his speech to everyone is like, please go home. We love you. You're wonderful, wonderful people. While they're out, destroying property, trying to overturn an election. And, I don't know how many people have injured. And like I said, the suicides, there's 6 suicides at least from just Capitol officers. But it just, that disconnect is just ridiculous.
I don't know. Let's dissect that for a bit, though. Based on what we've talked about, what should he have said? What should he have said?
What should he have said?
Yes.
This is not a way you go about it. If you're upset with the way things have transpired, attempting to hang the vice president is not a way that you go about it. Attempting a violence and destruction results in more violence and destruction. It isn't a cure. It's part of this. It's a disease. It's the problem. You are the problem. Stop doing what you're doing, or we're going to enforce, some hard laws on you, and you will be thrown in jail, prison.
Right. And you should have said all of that
instead of saying
way earlier.
Right. Probably during his speech.
I always think Trump gets the reputation for being and speaking down to people and maybe not being that bright himself, but I think all of it has always been a show. It's part of the con man
Right.
Sure, yeah.
repertoire, is that he's
Right.
talking, in terms that the people understand. And if we all agree that his supporters, the extreme elements at least, are looking for a place to belong, then reinforcing that he loves them and thinks that they're great people. It's how you would talk to like a third grader that stole your wallet.
Right.
But
Love you.
I think he was doing that on purpose. That's how he talks to his base.
All right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's how he talks. I mean, when you think about the debate between him and Joe Biden, and they start talking about hate groups that he was not condemning and actually supporting. When it got to the Proud Boys, what do you say? Do you condemn the Proud Boys? And what did he say? Proud Boys,
Stand back, stand by.
stand back, stand by. He can't do
Yeah.
it because he knows
Yeah.
that's his votes, that's his base, and he won't
Right.
go against them, no matter what they do. Even when they do something bad, even when they steal your wallet, he won't do it. And it just shows a complete lack of just leadership, which is not a shock. It's fucking Donald Trump. For the life of me, I understand to an extent wanting to try something different in terms of politics, get somebody who's not in the political world, try and shake things up. But for the life of me, I will never understand how it all, Donald Trump got that. It's Donald Trump.
I guess my point is that what he said that day to get people to go home, it wasn't like he just kind of stumbled on television and said the first thing that came to his head. That was all intentional. That
Right.
was planned out.
That makes it worse
he had
almost.
at least 4 hours, probably much longer, to think about what he was going to say that day. If you catch my drift.
Oh, I get you. Yeah.
But that was all part of it, because he knows what I know, I think, and I agree with this, is that you'd rather have 10 lions on your side than 100 sheep.
Mhm.
So if he can convince people to love him and do anything for him, even if it is just a fraction of the population, that's far more dangerous than 50% of the population that votes for somebody because they don't like the other guy. And that's it.
For sure.
Well, yeah, like I said, after the 4 hours, and everyone goes home, and eventually everyone did go home, and they were treated rather nicely too. Again, this goes back to if this was a Black Lives Matter, there'd be a lot more deaths than there were. That's just the fact of the matter. And they were just allowed just to walk back into their cars and just go home, as if they just spent any other day out in DC. It's just yeah, it's a bit. There's a what do you call it? A privilege, if you catch my drift there, that you get from doing that sort of. If you're just allowed to walk home, I know people personally that if they were part of that, they would not be allowed to walk home. They'd be in jail, prison. They wouldn't get nearly, not even half the breaks, not even a quarter. They would basically be treated as terrorists, like they should have been if they were there.
I've questioned whether or not white privilege is real in the past, but you cannot question what happened on January 6th and what had happened previously at Black Lives. I mean, there's just obviously there's, to a certain extent, there's white privilege, at least.
Yeah. At least on that front, for sure. So yeah, and like I said, I watched the certification. It came back and they just finished the job they were going to do anyway. And I had a fool's hope, but I had a smidget of hope that this was going to be a game changer, and that people that were just going along with Donald Trump were going to come to the error of their ways and, come back to reality, so to speak. And, with Lindsey Graham's, I'm done. That's enough for me. I've had it. Count me out. Bullshit that he was spewing. I actually kind of thought for a second, all right, thank God, just getting people back to reality here. So I have to follow this lunatic. And that just isn't the case. Somehow, some way, they turned it from an obvious attack on our democracy to reasonable political discourse, and it's not, Proud Boys that were attacking the Capitol. It was Antifa. It's just this delusion is it's deep, and I don't know how you fix it, and I don't know how you correct it in any way. It seems
you have
right.
to. Here's how you fix it. I know how to fix it. You have to have people run for elections that are more interested in bettering their communities and the livelihoods of those around them than their own self-interests, because that's all you have, at least at the national level right now in Congress, is a majority of people there are far more concerned with their own self-interest than they are the people they're supposed to be representing. And when they get done with the Capitol, the Capitol riot, the Republicans in particular go back, they get a kind of an idea of what their constituents think about that day, and they find out that a lot of them actually thought it was a good thing. And then all of a sudden, even though their own lives were at stake, they will, just in order to preserve their own jobs,
right,
go along with what their constituents think. And yes, that's why they're elected. They represent those constituents. But I think at the same time, you have to be able to stand up and say, well, no, that's wrong too.
Right.
Right. I remember distinctly there was a congressman, I don't know his name. He was actually helped putting up the barriers on the congressional floor.
Really?
And he later on said that if you went there, it was like a tourist guide. Like nothing was really bad that happened that day, essentially. Even though he was in the thick of it.
So even though he's barricading. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. What kind of tour guides is he going to?
Yeah, I don't know.
What tour is he taking?
Yeah.
Oh, this is where we get the barricades. All right. Yeah, I've done this before. Easy peasy. Yeah. What the hell? Yeah, it's all to keep their jobs. It's just nonsense. No one actually has any, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for here? Nobody has any
integrity.
Integrity. That's the word. Nobody, the integrity of, and I think a lot of people think, well, politics is a cutthroat sort of thing. If you have integrity, you're going to lose. You need to be, as shady as you can possibly be. It's like I said, it's cutthroat, very cutthroat. So,
right.
It is in a way, but I don't feel like it has to be, and that everyone just tries to one up themselves in terms of it in being like I said, but just there's just no integrity. I'm getting tired.
Right. Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of it's backed by cash, like money.
Right.
A lot of money is coming their way, so they have to do something that they might not agree with. But if they don't, then they lose that money.
They lose that job and that the prestige of saying they're a member of the House, a member of the Senate, the governor, state senator, that sort of thing.
Right.
Well, a lot of these people too that are sitting on Capitol Hill that are elected, that is all they are. They are career politicians. They actually don't have any skills that would be really relevant, in our workforce. So this is it for them. This is, what would Biden be doing if he wasn't president, or it wasn't even an elected official? What would he be? He'd be retired now, probably. But even before that, for 40 years he's been in Congress. He doesn't have any skills.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what he would be. Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, I agree.
So you just have to think about, these are people that this is their livelihoods. Their job is to be a politician and stay there as long as they can, to win elections. That's their job. It's not to represent people. It's to win elections and get, salary for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. And they're willing to do anything and say anything and anything they can to save their own job.
That's what I like about Indiana state government, all of our elected representatives. I'm not sure how it is in other states, but if you're a House member or a Senate member in Indiana, you only make $20,000 a year. So they typically have to do something else. They are out there as farmers or something.
Part-time job.
Yeah. So they are at least out there in the mix with the rest of the people,
Making Subway sandwiches.
doing something.
Dude,
Just
that's what
something.
I'd do if I was
Yeah.
fucking senator.
But then
Just
also a
passed
lot
this
of
law
elected
and now
officials,
make myself BLT.
a lot of elected officials at all levels were just born into money, and
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of
that's a
thing.
problem too.
All right,
Yeah.
guys. Do you have any final thoughts on January 6th? You could sum it up, maybe a few sentences, if you can.
No, I can go. I can try to come up with something. I think, and what sparked my interest is that you talked about how you didn't watch 9/11 live and unfold in real time. You watched it kind of afterwards. I watched it live, and I watched it in real time as it happened that whole day. So for me, this was almost like a second time through a traumatic event like that, watching it in real time. And I don't know if I was as afraid or scared. Obviously, I'm much older now, and I'm more comfortable with how I'm going to handle things. But I recognized very early on that this was a historical moment and something that I wouldn't ever forget. I can't say the same about 9/11 when it happened. As a young man, I don't know, I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
Or didn't understand the fallout or ramifications of it. This I do. The whole time I was thinking about the ramifications of it. And like you've mentioned, was everybody going to just turn over a new leaf and we were going to sing Kumbaya afterwards, or we were going to go right back into the clusterfuck that we are in? And I think here we are 13 months later and we know the answer.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'll leave that there and let Nick go.
Nick?
Well, I think that January 6th will definitely be a day that, like 9/11, that kind of leaves such a huge impact on American history. I'm still kind of, even though there's been so much time, every time I think back on it or talk about it, it's always still kind of like a sense of there's no way that happened. I can't believe that happened. But yeah, like Steele was saying, the ramifications that hit me too. Like I understood that too, because like, when I was a kid and learning about 9/11 and when that happened and all that was going down, I didn't really understand much of what was going on. I just, knew it was bad, but didn't like Steele said, had no idea what was not thinking as a kid what's going to happen next. But now I was able to see that, and that's very frightening stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to kind of continue with that, I remember coming home after, we got let go from school. By the way, on 9/11, a number of friends and I, we decided to go to the mall in the neighboring town, and that mall was closed, and we were pissed because we wanted to get a video game. I couldn't believe they shut down the mall because it just didn't seem like a likely target. And that's where my mind was. That's where my mentality was when I was like, however old I was when that happened, sophomore in high school.
You're younger than me. We were in high school.
Sophomore in high school. So, my mind was thinking on, getting that video game and playing a video game, even though, 3,000 people had just died.
Right.
And we had just been attacked. My mind was, playing a video game, and I was upset, annoyed that they shut down a mall because it just didn't seem like a likely target. And I came home to mom and older brother standing in front of the TV watching George Bush speak and talking to each other about how much they love the president. And I just had that feeling of this just seems like a lot of shit, a lot of bullshit. I feel like everyone just can't wait to show everyone else how patriotic they are. You think you're patriotic? Oh, check this out. And it just seems so phony to me. And I don't know if that's because I was onto something or because I was like 14, and I can't really grasp the situation as well as someone who's older and has lived through certain things that you kind of get a feel for, okay, this is a big moment here. And so, yeah, just like Steve, I didn't really get that from 9/11, but I did certainly get that from January 6th. I felt that fear that I'm assuming many people felt on 9/11. I just, I was too young to get it, but now I do, and it's frightening. I mean, the whole of the world, it's a big theater, All of the world is theater, man. You know, the line, all the world's a stage from the Shakespeare play, As You Like It. It rings true more so as the years have gone by. I mean, we are merely players on the grand stage. It's a perpetual play of actors, all vying for a speaking role. And sometimes bad actors are given lead roles. And if I were to equate an actor with a politician, I would consider Donald Trump the Tommy Wiseau of politicians. I, however, think of myself as more of an observer, kind of a critic in a way. I'm more in line with a Roger Ebert or a Gene Siskel, if you will. Having said that, I would give this event the same review Ebert gave the movie North. I hated it. And with that, I hope you enjoyed our conversation and will join us again for another installment of History with Hersefat. Take care of yourselves and each other.